Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. First and foremost, there's always these healer changes, and today's video, I want to get into why they're making changes, why healing feels bad, all of these things, in an area where the community is constantly sort of like talking past each other, even when they're in agreement, okay? So today's video, are healers weak or strong? And is healing hard or easy? Because these two things are actually separate ideas. Healers often are saying, I am struggling this expansion, it's a pain to heal, it's unfun to heal, and we've heard that a million times, right? A million videos about it, we get it. But people always sort of cite it as, why are these articles that Thune or Jack are making or whatever, saying the healers are strong? I feel weak against this encounter, I feel weak against this area. And the biggest thing I want to talk about today is that we are saying that healers are strong based off the ability to top off a health pool, not against the encounters. And this is where we're going to explain how the encounter design is impacting it, how healing is sort of just in this awful spot in this expansion, and then what they're going to do about it. And we're going to make another video about what they're doing about it, what changes they're making, and what we hope we're going to see out of 10.2. First, to get to this problem right now. Healers are strong and weak based on the ability to top up a health pool, and that is it. That is a metric that you're able to look at from one expansion to another. Notably, Battle for Azeroth, you would have the Gahoon encounter where it's just taking forever to top off health pools in the face of the rot and burst damage that the encounter featured. When you had 5 healers blasting their hearts out, it took forever to top off a health pool. That was the beginning of the expansion, but notably, when you go into Vault of the Incarnates, you were able to push up health pools quickly. There was a fight like Kurog where you're kind of just getting pulsed for 30% of your life and then topping, and then 40% of your life and then topping, back and forth without end, right? And that's why we're talking about it from a strength perspective from the health pool. The challenge, though, is that healing gets harder or easier relative to the strength of a healer. And it's sort of like this spectrum of damage, if you want to imagine that. There's multiple fights that you feature in Season 2 of Dragonflight that have burst damage, like in dungeons. You have Kragmaw and Underrot, who's going to run all over the place and unleash his ticks onto the group. But then you also have like Chargath or Forge Master Gorek in Neltharis, who both feature a lot of burst damage. The difference between them is all about the encounter design and the encounter tuning, which makes a healer have an easier or harder time on healing those different boss fights, right? And that's where you want to start drawing the line in terms of how they're making these encounters easier or harder for healers. It's a lot easier for the healer to be able to experience this content when healers are less able to top off a health pool. There's a term in FPS games called TTK, which is the time to kill. And that's kind of how you rate guns one versus another and how quickly you can like down an enemy. If you have an SMG, for example, and you're at close range, it's going to have a lot higher time to kill, or a lot, I guess, lower of a time to kill than an AR at close range, right? So you're like, oh, I want to use the SMG, and there's the metric for it. For healers in Dragonflight, it's like a time to top in terms of how quickly you can top off a player. That way, they're going to make sure they're at full HP, right? And so with a time to top being very high in Dragonflight, the root of the problem is the talent trees themselves. They scale very rapidly with gear, and as we saw throughout this expansion, to the point that even hybrid abilities like Vamp Embrace, Ancestral Guidance, Nature's Vigil, all were being nerfed because they were scaling so rapidly out of control relative to the health bars that you were running without healers in Dragonflight Season 1, right? In order to be able to fully sort of mitigate this problem and actually just cauterize it, to be able to like stop it, it would have to result in a number of different changes to how your spells work. It would have to be either like mass nerfs to the healers directly to their spells. We'll talk about some of the changes they're making for Season 3, don't worry. It would have to be, an explosion in health. But what Blizzard's done this expansion is apply band-aids, which is what they usually do, okay? This isn't like anything new with their design in the game. What they've done in 10.0 is they exploded health by 40%. They've done this in the past. They did it as like a hot fix leading up to Battle for Azara lore, where the Azerite gear got a substantial amount of extra stamina being like lumped onto it as you enter the second tier of that expansion, right? Then they added 25% health and damage in 10.1, and now we're going into 10.2, and there are these healer mana nerfs by not having Rashok anymore. They're nerfing a number of AoE healing spells and cooldowns, but they're buffing single target healing and trying to make sure that they're addressing some symptoms, but not addressing the root cause, okay? as frustrating as it is seeing healer nerfs going into next tier, as frustrating as it is seeing the HP change and the damage change throughout this expansion, the number one thing, and as frustrating as it is that they are making these changes to make the symptoms less. And if they did not make those changes, then the symptoms of this problem would be even higher. Okay, and if you want to imagine actually what the world would look like, look no further than 10.2's Season 3 Mythic Plus testing, okay? When I'm doing testing in these dungeons, and obviously they're incomplete, you are hardcore glass cannons. If you are taking any sort of extra damage, you're just dead. Your healer's ability to react to the damage is insanely low. And so whenever you watch, let's say like a Disc Priest do PTR testing for Season 3, you're like, wow, they just have no time to react, or like, I really miss the instant radiances that you had. Those things are true, but it's because you're in this glass cannon mode for how they've sort of designed the damage of the dungeons thus far. They're making changes and it's far from complete, but that is that sort of environment that we would feature in 10.1 and in 10.2 had they done nothing. Now you might be asking, why are they making healing so hard? I get it if healers want to be strong, if you want to say it that way, Jack, whatever, fine. But why is healing so hard? Well, it's hard because healers are strong, which sounds ridiculous, right? But again, hear me out. A challenge for a boss fight is a spectrum. Like we mentioned before, there's the Underrot, there's the Kragmaw, the Forge Master Go-Wreck, there's like burst damage, right? But whenever healers are able to top off a health pool rapidly, then it puts even more pressure on the encounter designers. It's like they got a little memo after Shadowlands and they said, hey, we don't want to have healers be the passenger princess role anymore for dungeons. We want to make sure the damage is really high. We want to make sure healers have to heal. Well, that was feedback I and many other people gave, is that we didn't like being 4th DPS players. So it's fair. The issue is they try to add this damage, but then healers are topping players so quickly, and so the encounter designers are escalating the burst and escalating the pressure and infinitely scaling content, and then we get the area that we're in right now. And now what they're able to do is just apply a number of band-aid fixes. And I will say, and this will probably be another video in its entirety, they are making some changes that I believe are going to be on the right track. Notably, one of them is the HP explosion that we are going to be receiving with a larger pool of health. One of the frustrating things with like a Barris and like raid healing has been the fact that things will just destroy you. Everybody can gear quickly and you can get to the 445, 447 mark quickly, easily, great. But things, even when max geared, just hit you like a truck, to the point that if you don't have your defensive up, you don't have your personal up, you will just die instantly in a raid environment. And even in a key environment, as you even try to get into like your mid-20s, you take a little bit of extra damage and you are just dead. So that burst damage is insanely high as a result, because you hit that max level of gear and you don't really get much further stamina gains to be able to help you mitigate the incoming damage, leading once again to high raid overhealing and just high yo-yo effect. Everybody sort of fighting for their life, even in like 20s as an example, because the burst damage is super high. The Strength of Healers kind of impacts everything across the board. It has been present in pretty much everything that we've seen for changes for Dragonflight. Notably in 10.2, they're nerfing things like Rallying Cry, they're nerfing damage reduction from Barrier, Devotion Aura, and things like Symbol of Hope, because damage reduction in defensives and personals and all of these things get increasingly strong when increasing levels of burst damage are going out. So right there again, there's so many other pieces of this game that are changing as a result of Blizzard's lack of longevity or lack of long-term vision for where healing is going to be able to go. We saw in Battle for Azeroth, you had all these different borrowed power systems, and whether you liked them or not, they increased your ability to top off a health pool. And to be able to mitigate it, they increased stamina on Azerite gear. They gave you stamina nodes for increasing your neck level and for increasing essence levels and everything along those lines, so that as you progress through those systems, you gain more stamina, so that you still were able to increasingly top off health pools, but not at such a crazy high rate as we are experiencing right now. And so encounter designers want to make sure that healers are challenged, and they're locked into this corner where they don't want to redesign entire dungeons and abilities to mitigate it. And so you kind of have it with the raid encounters by adding lots of negative heal absorbs like we saw out of Rashok. Those are also very prominently featured in Amir Drasil's incoming raid. But there's also a lot of rot damage that's going to be coming around the corner as well. And I believe there's a fight or two that's also going to have some Thorns type mechanic, as where DPS players are dealing damage back to themselves. So there's a number of things they can do for the raid if they make sure that stamina is scaling appropriately throughout the raid. And, you know, the World First guilds aren't just max eye level from the beginning, which they are doing, which is going to be a good thing. But a lot of these problems that we're seeing across the board and changes that we're seeing across the board have one central problem area that of origination, and it all starts at that point. And now in the next video, we're going to talk about what they're doing about it and trying to make healing better and try to make healing end, I think it'll end, on a high note for Dragonflight. So if you're enjoying this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the Patreon if you want to continue supporting. That would be fantastic. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Keep an eye out for our next video where we talk about what Blizzard's actually going to be doing about the problem going into the next season and whether or not it might actually work. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch y'all next time.